You received an Order of Australia in 1988 for your services to the profession, and which is a very great honour, of course.
Yeah.
And at that time, were you thinking there's still much more I would like to do?
Oh, well, I was in full flight of practice in 88. I was 65, and I continued on for 88 to 98 to last year when I sold my chambers. So, you know, I was fortunate I was able to go on for so long, and I'm fortunate even now to have a few briefs. I've got one to take up to the country and read.
I'm very interested to know your feelings about the. It's often the case that people retire from the law and regret it because they've enjoyed the activity, the mental activity that it brings. And I've wondered, from your point of view, I suppose that would always have been the case. You would have continued on, and you did. And the mental activity is a very important aspect of your life, which you would never want anyone to take away. But do you think there's something to be said? You were mentioning before about the marketplace. I suppose the downside of a marketplace is that sooner or later people start to get less work. And that wasn't the case for you, of course, for so many years.
I think
but that would be a downside for many.
Yeah.
And they may feel, well, there's nothing for me, I may as well resign, which is a shame, isn't it? But yet it can't support them all.
I've tried to provide for the future by developing my grazing interests, which I found absorbing and fascinating. And that keeps me a great interest, and the opportunity of keeping fit by physical work.
Did you find any of your contemporaries were too consumed by their practice? You have kept your outside interests, as you mentioned.
I suppose some are. I try to avoid the habit of critical judgment of.
I don't mean in the sense of being critical, just simply that they were consumed, perhaps in a way that made them unhappy. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know any people who've been busy, very busy advocates who've been unhappy because they've got too much work.
Sure.
I don't think so.
I interviewed Philip Oppas at the Victorian Bar.
Yes, I remember him.
Yes, and he, I asked because he was very unhappy, and when he spoke to me, but then again, the impression I had was a lot of it came from his defending Ronald Ryan, and in some sense getting too close to his client. Ronald Ryan, the last person to be hanged in Victoria, he in a sense had crossed the line and identified with his client, as he said himself. And have you? Yes. Sorry, you were going to say.
That's interesting. I remember Philip Oppas. He was a very intense person, a very intense advocate. He had a brief in that barring of claims litigation way back in 1955 in the High Court. And his intensity, I remember, operated to alienate, certainly in manner, one member of the bench. I think it was Sir Wilfrid Fullagar, who was, of course, a great Victorian judge. Yes, it's dangerous to get too close to your client. You must try to be objective.
It's never happened to you. It's never been, in any sense, a problem you've had to encounter.
I have tried to keep my distance and avoid personal immersion in the client's problems. You know what I mean?
Conversely, have you ever encountered clients who you felt, in a sense, there was something deeply amiss You don't have to name clients, of course, but what I mean is I've interviewed one or two people who've said that they've been in the presence of what they would describe as a truly evil person, and that was an uncomfortable time for them acting for that person.
Not having had much criminal work, I can't recall any clients who were in that capacity.
I did talk to one who also had encountered that in the white-collar capacity, white-collar crime.
Oh, really?
Situation, yes. A rather interesting character who was rather good at annoying the judge, apparently.
What, the client?
Yes. He sat there smiling in a very unpleasant way at the judge, who apparently was unnerved by it all. Yes.
I've really done only one murder case through to the end, and that was in Perth, in which I appeared for an Israeli migrant who'd not been many years in the country. He came to the country with money, and he had his own business as a share trader. He went overseas on a holiday, probably back to Israel, with his wife, and when he came back, he discovered that the man whom he'd left in charge of his business had, as he saw it, misappropriated a lot of money while he was away. He was very put out, to say the least, because he visited the office of the allegedly unfaithful employee who was working somewhere else at this stage in the CBD of Perth early one morning when he knew his former employee would be present. And there was a violent altercation in the course of which my client obtained access to a large knife, and the allegedly unfaithful employee was killed by a wound from the knife. And my client, the Israeli, was arraigned for murder, and I had the brief. And it was a very remarkable case because the allegedly unfaithful employee came from a prominent Perth family who turned up, some of whom turned up in quite large numbers during the trial, and did not conduct themselves altogether well during the actual trial.
A lot of hectoring.
Yes. The case was very hard fought. And I managed to persuade the jury to, if they didn't acquit him of murder, to go no further than convict him of manslaughter, which they did. The trial judge, a man called Pigeon, Justice Pigeon, not a great judge, persuaded himself, or was persuaded, to sentence him to a period of imprisonment about the same as would have been awarded under a life sentence for murder, 15 years. I didn't do the appeal, but the Israeli appealed to the Court of Criminal Appeal, which reduced the sentence to 5 years, which was about right. I always remember receiving, I knew one of the family who lived in Sydney, and I remember receiving a letter of bitter complaint that I'd ever taken the brief.
But that was hardly your fault.
No, I didn't know these people in Perth, but it was a very bitter letter. I think I replied in polite terms, explaining my position. But that was really the only murder case I've ever done.
Do you wish you'd done more, or not necessarily?
Oh, well, I never really fancied the idea of a predominantly criminal practice. My barrister son seems to be headed that way. He's doing a lot of criminal work, which he enjoys, but I don't think I would have changed the sort of work I did. I was lucky enough to do for criminal work, even if I could have.